makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Hello and welcome to the next update on the Russian-Ukrainian war. And these last couple of days haven't seen major strategic changes to the situation. I feel like I'm almost opening every one of these videos with the exact same phrase, and that is the truth, really. There hasn't been much advance in the last couple of days by the Russians, aside from they're moving towards encircling Kyiv and Kharkiv, and there is currently heavy fighting in in and around Mariupol. So I'm going to discuss what the implications of this is. First, let's look at the strategic map. And yeah, practically identical to yesterday's, not much going on. Some of the interesting tidbits that I must mention before I forget, there was apparently reports of an attack on a Romanian ship that I read. This could be worrying, obviously. An accidental shooting of a NATO ship could result in some form of escalation. Now, I don't think that NATO would enter a war just because a ship got attacked with, credible evidence that this was done accidentally. But still, this every risk of, lighting up the powder keg is problematic. Obviously, I want to emphasize there's no sign whatsoever that NATO wants to get involved militarily. I think it is content right now in simply supplying to the best of its ability the Ukrainian army and air force, but actually getting involved in a ground war or air war or establishing a no-fly zone, as some commentators have asked, I don't think this is realistic in any way. Now, what else? Yeah, not much. I mean, the southern front is the one where, again, the strategic situation is less favorable to the Ukrainians. If Mariupol falls, I think it wouldn't be a catastrophe by any stretch of the imagination, but it would be kind of a psychological hit, because so far Ukraine has avoided losing a major city. And even though Mariupol isn't one of their major cities, it's not as large as Kharkiv or Kiev by any stretch, or Odessa, it's still kind of moderately large. I'm going to show you on Google Maps. So it's a decently sized city. Um, so it would have some modest psychological impact because so far they have not allowed any city of the size of Mariupol or larger to fall to Russia. And from what we know, there is currently fighting inside the city. Again, this does not mean that the Russians are anywhere close to capturing the city. But what we do know is that it is probably surrounded to some extent, if not entirely. And it remains to be seen whether there are enough defenses to hold off the Russians or what form the Russian incursion into the city is taking shape. But that is the situation here in Mariupol. And yeah, aside from that, I'm starting to think that the plan that the Russians have right now isn't to make a full-on urban assault on Kyiv or Kharkiv. They must by now know that the capability of their army is very much lower than they expected. And urban combat is going to take a long time. I mean, it took them months to subdue Grozny in the Second Chechen War. I mean, these things are not easy. And the defenses that they would face in Kiev are far in excess. I mean, far, 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 far in excess than what they would face, that they have previously faced, sorry, in places like Grozny or Aleppo. So, it's no comparison. They would need a much stronger force, and they would need to accept much higher casualties. Now, even if they successfully encircle Kyiv, which I do think is possible in the next couple of, next 24, 48 hours, I don't know. By now, the defenders in Kiev are very well stocked with weapons. There is no doubt in my mind. So, you can see it in sort of the confidence. Compare the confidence that you see, the times that Zelensky has appeared uh, on on uh, on video in the last couple of days versus how the situation looked on that first night of attack, where he was basically like saying like I might not be alive tomorrow. You can tell by the statements and by the the attitude. The attitude is one of a government that is relatively secure in its position, and that is a good thing. And also, the you don't see much alarmism from, for example, the Western military uh, agencies. So they must know something that we don't know to some extent. They must know that their defensive capabilities are still quite formidable. So I don't see Kyiv falling anytime soon. I don't see Kharkiv falling anytime soon. And I do think that the Russian army at this point is going to be very risk adverse and will rather try, less costly ways in which they can kind of strangulate the Ukrainians. So surrounding the city is probably a safer option for them, so that they can have a stronger hand in the negotiating table, which I think is their objective right now. Same with, like, for example, capturing as much territory as they can here in the south, which is the territory that they presumably would want to annex. So I think the war effort right now, I think, is going to be geared towards Russia having a stronger hand at the negotiating table, rather than complete their political objective of basically destroying the Ukrainian army and toppling the government and turning it, annexing large parts of territory and turning Ukraine into basically nothing more than a satellite state. So I think that's off the table. Uh, so, what else? That's the map from the Institute of Studying War, which hasn't been updated yet. Oh, it's 2 p.m. They usually update it around this hour, which is why I kind of wait to do my videos, but they haven't updated it, so yeah. Let's look at Twitter now. What else has happened? Yeah, that's a video of the fighting in Mariupol. Yeah. It could get bloody in Mariupol. Because it's a smaller city, they might risk a more intense urban combat than they would in a much larger city like Kiev and Kharkov. Kharkiv, sorry. Yeah. Long line of military medical vehicles drove through Homiel this night. There are reports that lots of badly injured Russian soldiers are transported to the hospitals at Homiel and Mazir at the border with Ukraine. Yeah. What else? Yeah, so they're starting to receive new TB2 drones from Turkey. Those are the ones that you've probably seen on some videos, attacking Russian convoys. Very effective. It's a very effective drone. Oh, this was very interesting. So the Ministry of Defense of the UK publishes every so often a very short intelligence update. It's worth giving it a read. And I think I published the previous one that they upload. I think I read. Oh yeah. So this was the first one that they tweeted earlier in the day, and this one was much more ominous. I mean, they basically said Ukrainian forces continue to hold the cities of Kharkiv, Kherson, and Mariupol. However, all three cities are now likely encircled by Russian forces. And then the one that they published a few hours later was much less doom and gloom. So they definitely did take Kherson. That was a city that the Russians took on the first day, and then Ukraine retook it the second day. It's been in Ukrainian hands since. So it's a key kind of crossing point over the Dnieper. So it is important, but it's rather small. It's not nearly the size of even a smallish city like Mariupol. There is a chance that they might retake it again. I don't know. But yeah, no more doom and gloom in this sense. What else came up on my Twitter? This was a really impressive photo of some fighting. I believe this is outside Kyiv or Kharkiv. That is, yeah. I mean, there's so many pictures of Russian convoys banged up like this. Yeah. And it's probably from the airborne troops because this looks like a BMT, sorry, BMD infantry fighting vehicle. It's kind of small-ish. These are slightly smaller versions of their BMP series of infantry fighting vehicles that they use for their airborne troops. And Russia is the only country that has specialized uh, armored equipment for their airborne troops. The US used to have some, the Sheridan tank. But yeah, they're pretty well armed. They're very mobile. It's a mechanized force, which is not something that most airborne troops are. But they're kind of smaller. You can tell the difference, even though the shape is similar to the BMDs. The BMPs are smaller, and you can compare with one of the other AP. This is the BTRs. These are the wheeled APCs, and you can clearly see that it's smaller. So I suspect this was an airborne or components of airborne troops. I don't know. It might be a mix. Yeah. What else? Oh, this was interesting. So I've mentioned, and you've all probably seen this as well. Russian vehicles have a Z painted on them. It's a very sloppy Z, which suggests that they did it hours before the invasion started. Um, so it was obvious to me that this was a marker for aircraft, especially, and for friendly fire, because they use the same types of equipment, very similar equipment. You know, the BMP series, BTR series. Uh, they need to have some way of identifying and avoiding friendly fire. So they painted the Z's, but apparently it's much more complex than that. So I was not aware of this, but the Z with an outline refers to the forces that have been invading through Crimea, and the ones without the outline are the ones that are all the other fronts. There's also an O from the forces from Belarus. There is, so presumably the ones that are outside Kiev would have an O. I haven't noticed this. This is strange. I'll have to double check. The V is naval infantry, which we haven't seen much. Then X are Kadyrov's Chechens. These are an elite group that apparently tried, I'm not sure if it was them, but they tried to assassinate Zelensky a day or two ago and failed. But these fucker, I have no. So the two units, I'll be honest, I think in any war that is a war of aggression where one country is led by an authoritarian leader, we should feel some empathy for even the Russian soldiers. I have a degree of empathy for the Russian soldiers. I don't think that they are willing participants in this conflict, and it's a shame that a lot of them have died. It's a shame that a lot of mothers are going to get the news that their sons, which may have been conscripts, are dead. So it's a bit of a shame. And obviously, I'm rooting for the Ukrainians. There are, however, two units that I have no problem uh, finding out if they get completely annihilated. One is, of course, the Azov Battalion, which are a neo-Nazi militia. Even if they don't get wiped out, I hope at the end of the war, once the threat is gone, they get removed from any official duties. If they serve any purpose in defending the country, then that's fine. But they should have no role in any post-war situation. And if they get wiped out, well, SADs. And the other is Kadyrovs, because these are fucking treacherous Chechens. They are Islamist fighters, and for a country that very admirably resisted Russian aggression, to see these people, fight for Putin is, and they look like way more hyped for war than the average Russian soldiers. Like I've seen videos of them kind of preparing for combat, and they look very, very hyped up. So yeah, those could all die for what it's worth. And the A is Special Forces, National Guard, FSB, Special Ops. I haven't seen many with A. I don't recall seeing an A. So now you know. What else? Oh yeah, this video is really heartbreaking. I mean, these are just ordinary people of every age, someone's brother, someone's uncle, someone's father. Um, God knows how many of these are going to survive. But, all the best of luck to them. Yeah, that is. Oh, this one's so funny. So this is a couple. They captured a couple of T-80 tanks, and they're just taking the ammo on a truck on a car. This is so funny. Can you imagine just like driving uh, driving to your grandma's house and be like, oh, by the way, I have a couple of tank shells in the back seat. That is pretty funny. The one on the left that looks funny is the anti-tank round. The one on the right is probably a high explosive round. So when a tank is going to fire at, for example, a building or a troop concentration, it's going to use the high explosive round, which does more boom but penetrates less. It's going to fire against the tank, then it's going to use one of these. This is what is called in military parlance an armor-piercing discarded sabot round. Sorry, more complex than that. It's an armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot round. So what it does is basically, this is kind of a shell that when the tank fires, the case separates, and what's left is this very long and thin penetrator, usually made of either uranium, depleted uranium, or tungsten. These are the two main materials used for anti-tank rounds because they're considered the hardest materials that you can find. So a few countries don't use uranium as a matter of policy, like Germany, for example. All their tank rounds are tungsten. But other countries like the US, Russia, use uranium depleted rounds, which supposedly are not radioactive. But why would I not want to be handling them for long? I don't know. Anyway, so it's a very small it's like a giant needle that flies towards the enemy tank, and it has no explosive power. There's no explosive charge in it. And what it does is merely the energy of the projectile firing into the other tank, because it's like a really small point. It's a needle that's going to hit. All that kinetic energy is going to be focused on just that tiny tip of the round. Creates a catastrophic. Well, A is able to penetrate the tank's armor and then cause a catastrophic internal explosion merely through the kinetic force, killing most likely everyone inside, and often blowing the tank turret off the hull. So yeah, that's how modern anti-tank guns work, and this is one of those. So what the Russians do, I've explained this as well. The Russian tanks have a lot of ERA. That's explosive reactive armor. That's the little boxes that you see here. It doesn't have any on the hull, but see those wedges on the sides of the turrets? Those are known as that's part of the explosive reactive armor. And you can see some other tanks that have more of them on the hulls as well as on the sides. Those are basically mini explosives that are attached to the tank. And the point is that they will explode the moment that an anti-tank round hits it. And that explosion will divert slightly the path of the round, that big needle that's coming your way, and cause less kinetic energy to hit the tank, and therefore be more, be less effective at penetrating it. That's the whole point of them. So the Russians really like using that kind of armor because it compensates for the fact that a lot of these are very old tanks, sort of mid to late Cold War era. The T-72 is from the 70s, T-80 is from the 80s. They do not have the same kind of sophisticated armor that a lot of the NATO tanks have, which NATO armor is basically made of different ceramic. This is all top secret, by the way. We don't know exactly what ceramic materials are being used, and they sort of get composed into layers and spaces as well. So it's a combination of different materials that make up that armor. It was originally developed in a place called Chobham in England, and it's known quite commonly as Chobham armor. But yeah, that is what the Russians use. So that was today's lesson in tank warfare, people. Okay, you can thank me later. You can impress your friends and your crushes about how much you know now about tank combat, thanks to me. Anyway, what else? Yeah, nothing really. Well, this is probably somewhere outside, outskirts of Kharkiv. The bad news is the other bad news is civilian casualties have gone up. There is concern over this. I think Ukraine has estimated that there's been about 2,000 casualties, civilian casualties, and if the urban combat gets intensified, this is gonna be worse. Russian helicopters flying in Odessa Oblast. So they've made a pretty big advance west of the Dnieper in that area. So this was the prong that went west of Crimea. But again, remember what I've been saying since the very first video. Just because you see Russian troops somewhere does not mean they have captured it, does not mean that they can hold it. So these are, the Russian army, especially its airborne troops and special operations forces, have very much a capacity to make very quick movements into enemy territory. That does not mean that you need more troops to hold the ground. So, yeah. Cool. I think that's it for today. Yep. Oh, there was also reports of a Sukhoi 34 being shot down. There was wreckage that you can definitely see. Oh, look, that one has the V. Yeah, the Sukhoi 34 it's their newest ground attack aircraft. It's very big, it's very expensive, and more importantly, they have very few of them. So shooting one down is pretty impressive. Yep. Cool. Oh yeah, the anti-tank guided missiles and man pads have been arriving. This is all very good. Good news. Yeah, that's the ERA. That one's very obvious. You can see. That looks like a Ukrainian tank, by the way. No, I don't know. No, it's a T-70. It's an early T-70, T-72. The camo looks Ukrainian, though. Could be Ukrainian. Yeah, actually, I think it probably is Ukrainian. Yeah. Cool. All right, on that note, we are done for today. Let's see what happens tomorrow. Again, I don't think there's going to be much change in the strategic situation for tomorrow. Again, Southern Front is probably the one that deserves the most attention, but I don't think they're going to make any big inroads into Kyiv or Kharkiv. So we'll see. We'll see. The more time passes, the more the Russian economy starts to suffer, the more their logistics problems are gonna get worse. I'm sure that the Russian army is in the process of adapting to a lot of the mistakes that they've made over the first couple of days, and some of these problems will be solved. However, some of their other problems, the bigger problems, are more structural in nature, and I don't think that they'll be able to resolve them in a matter of days or weeks or even months. So, it remains to be seen which of these problems is bigger in terms of eroding their combat effectiveness so far. But I suspect that the structural problems are the bigger ones. So we will see. Yeah, on that note, enjoyed this video. If you like, please share, please subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter, where I am also sharing a lot of news from some of the accounts that I follow. I wish I could speak Russian, because then that I could, actually read some of the Russian stuff. But then again, they're probably lying to a lot of degree. But yeah. Anyway, see you next time.